Hello everyone and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and I wanted to start talking about some of the many different commander-based formats that add a little twist and can really spice up your creativity and fun. Today I want to talk about the smallest subset of commander, Tiny Leaders. Tiny Leaders is a version of Commander started in 2013 and has gone through several iterations since then. But for those of you who don't know anything about the format, let's talk over what makes this so unique. The biggest and most obvious rule in Tiny Leaders is that no card can be worth over 3 mana, including your commander. This may seem like a big disadvantage, but you will actually find that theirs is far easier than you would think. There's almost 700 commanders to choose from with a mana value of 3 or less, and there's often many different options even at the 3 color commanders. Every set comes with a chance to add to this selection of cards, and in our most recent set, at the time of recording, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, we have 19 new legends join 3 and under. Every archetype and every kind of card that you'd want to build around can be found at 3 or less mana, so it's a really great opportunity, and maybe you'll find some cards to add to your other decks in the process. So the second biggest change in Tiny Leaders is that this is a 50 card singleton deck compared to the 100 card singleton decks of Commander. I've been spending some time brewing some Tiny Leaders decks for the last couple weeks and found that these seem to be way more powerful than I imagined. Since there's only gas, there's really no need to find that 99th card because you don't need it. You know, at 50, you're going to have between 16 and 20 lands, leaving you about 30 cards to add to the deck, so all of them are just awesome, great card. This has definitely also changed up how I build decks because of this restricted number of cards. There's a lot of cards that I would just auto-include because, of course, you're building a commander deck, you need this, but I really had to stop and think, is this actually helping me in this deck? When it really came down to it, I really had to prioritize what cards were necessary and what cards I just didn't need. This process, gave me a lot of evaluation and really is going to help me going back to my normal commander deck saying, do I really need to add this card I add in every deck, or is it actually not as good as I think it is? And then next up, we have the third biggest change, which brings your life total down from 40 to only 25. This helps reflect the lower power and toughness of creatures on the board, but do not be confused that these cards are worse or less powerful. The Tiny Leaders rule set works perfectly to enable faster wins with combo style decks. You can very easily build decks around cards that can combo out very early if you want to. Of course, make sure your play group is okay with this, because if they're not and you do this, they're going to kick you out and then you got nobody to play Tiny Leaders with. But, just keep in mind who you're going to be playing against when you start designing decks. But before I cover some of the other changes that Tiny Leader has, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'm always trying to find new and interesting ways to build decks and show my audience, so if you have anything that you think would be interesting as a video, or maybe you want to see more Tiny Leader stuff, please leave that down in the comments down below. Now that we've covered most of the format altering rules, let's look and see what else Tiny Leaders does different than Commander. Not only can you have creatures as your commander, but you can also have planeswalkers as your commander as long as they're still 3 mana or less. There's a surprisingly high number of planeswalkers under 3 mana as well, with a total of 61. Now, the rate at which we get new planeswalkers is going to be far slower, especially now, because we are only expected to get 1 planeswalker per set, and the likelihood that it's 3 or under is, a toss-up, so we really won't know. And the last main rule change in the first version of Tiny Leaders is mulliganing. Since combo decks can be much easier, since there are far fewer cards, they've decided that you do not get a mulligan in Tiny Leaders. And in addition to that, your starting hand size also is diminished if you're playing partner commanders, because you have more cards basically at your disposal. If you are playing partner commanders, you are limited to only 6 cards instead of 7 in your starting hand. I don't believe you draw a 7th card and put it on the bottom either. You just start with 6 instead of 7. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. Some of the partner pairs can be devastating and allow for a lot more answers in the command zone, so the reduction in starting hand size makes a lot of sense. Now, along with everything else I've said, Tiny Leaders also has its own ban list, which seems pretty similar to the Commander ban list, but there's a couple exceptions that deal with them cutting out pretty much any fast mana available at 3 or under, and basically any tutor spells. Because this format is already so small, I mean, that just kind of makes sense in my opinion. You don't need all of these great tutor spells or fast mana to win the game faster. You're kind of already going to do that, so check out that ban list if you're interested in building one of these decks, and you'll kind of see some of the differences, but it's pretty similar to the Commander ban list if I'm being honest. Now, I couldn't find a date on exactly when this happened, but apparently a sub-format of Tiny Leaders called Tiny Leaders Reborn was released maybe years later. I'm not quite sure. That changed a few additional things, and if you're interested in playing this variant as well, here's what the differences are. First off, there were additional cards added to the ban list, with some of them being commanders that are banned outright as commanders, but you're allowed to play them in your deck still. So that's an interesting note, that there was some cards they deemed too powerful and let you still play them in your deck though. Next up, I didn't mention this before, but apparently Tiny Leaders has a color restriction, limiting the amount of colors you can have in your deck to 3, including if you're playing like partner commanders. Obviously, if you have 1 card, it can't be over 3 mana, so it can't be more than 3, but partner commanders can kind of get around that. Well, in Tiny Leaders Reborn, they edit that and say, well, no, there's actually no restriction on the amount of colors you can have, but notably, they did ban the only 2 5-color options in the format. I'm not quite sure. Maybe they were too strong or they just allowed for too much, but the most you can have is now 4, basically. And lastly, they dropped the starting life total from 25 down to 20. I guess maybe it was too high. I don't really see that. There's a lot of really, really strong cards and combos and all this stuff you can do, so I guess if 20 is better than 25, I'm not sure. I haven't had a lot of play testing of Tiny Leaders yet, but I'm hoping to because it seems very, very fun. Tiny Leaders is a very cool and interesting variant of Commander that can really change up how you build your decks. I've been in a deck building slump recently. I've kind of just been, putting out regular videos and doing all this stuff, but at my home, what am I bringing to my, game store and what am I playing? I've been really having a hard time deciding. And this has really ignited that spark in me again to kind of think about all these different options and what you can do with less mana. I love building restrictions. It's what makes Commander as fun as it is, and I'm very much enjoyed looking at Tiny Leaders and just seeing what kind of awesome decks I can build with it. And I hope you're interested too, because I'm going to be releasing one Tiny Leaders deck every week for the next 2 or so months, hopefully. We'll see if I can get there and see how it goes. If this is something you guys are interested in, I'll continue to post videos about this, but if it's not, no big deal. I'm just trying to, switch it up and make sure that there's new and enjoyable content out there for all my viewers. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I really hope you enjoyed learning about Tiny Leaders, and maybe you'll give it a try yourself. If you have a Tiny Leaders deck or some ideas for one, please leave it down in the comments down below. I would love to see it. And also, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please do so. It would really mean the world to me. And one last thing, I know I ask a lot, but if you could leave a like and share this video with a friend, that would be super helpful. YouTube sees that, helps me get more views out there, and it would just be so, so amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And today, Scryfall card of the day is Scourge. When Leonin settlers abandon their homes to the Nim, items of value are often left behind. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.